Katherine. I am a menstrual wellbeing coach and I am TOTM's period coach. Today I am here to give you the lowdown on all things bleed. Hopefully this should answer a lot of those questions that you've had. Before we start, if at any point you have any cause for concern or you need some personalised advice, please do reach out to your healthcare provider and they can give that to you. The first question is, what actually is menstrual blood? So although we actually always use the word blood, menstrual blood is actually more than just blood. During your period, you're losing blood, but you're also losing vaginal fluid, cells and fluid from the uterine lining as it sheds during your bleed. So there's a little bit more going on than just blood. Looking at that average bleed time and what's going on for you. During your menstrual cycle, your period or the time you spend bleeding can last anywhere between 3 and 8 days. It tends to average around 5 days, but whatever's normal for you is right. The bleeding tends to be its heaviest on the first 2 days of your cycle, and day 1 is that first day of significant bleeding or the day that you need a period product. According to the NHS website, you lose around 5 to 12 teaspoons of blood during your bleed, depending on how heavy your cycle is for you. So looking at our period colours, periods change throughout the cycle depending on what's going on in our lives, and there are lots of different ways that your period blood can change colour, and it can be a helpful indicator of letting us know that everything's as it should be, or we may have some cause for concern. If your blood is bright red, that means it is fresh blood, it's a nice steady flow. That is the ideal for your cycle. If you have pink blood, it could be an indicator of some hormonal changes going on. It could be your blood is mixing with cervical fluid. It can also be a sign of spotting if you're noticing that before your period starts. Brown blood or darker red blood tends to come at the beginning and the end of your cycle. It's just a more oxygenated type of blood. Black blood can come at the beginning or the end of your cycle, and that is another indicator of older blood that's been around for a little bit longer. If your blood is orange or grey, it could be a sign of infection, so that's absolutely the time to seek some medical support if that is something you're seeing. So as we've already mentioned, spotting is a type of bleeding. Usually it's light and you don't need a period product, or the lightest period product that you use is suitable for that time. Spotting's usually caused by changes in our hormone levels during our cycles. Sudden fluctuations in those hormones can cause unexpected spotting. You might notice it at ovulation, just before your bleed's about to start, or if it's particularly stressful for you at the moment, or you've got some other health conditions happening or health issues, you might notice some spotting. Although it's mostly harmless and really common, it can be a sign that something else is happening. Do get yourself checked out if it's something that you can't justify in other ways. So if it's not around ovulation, if lifestyle things are absolutely fine for you, do go and get yourself checked out if you're concerned. Next up, heavy bleeding. It's super common. There are loads of treatments out there if heavy bleeding is something that you're experiencing and it's impacting your day-to-day life. You might have a heavy period or a heavy bleed if you need to change your pad or your tampon every 1 to 2 hours, or if you use a menstrual cup and you're emptying it more frequently than the cup product recommends. That could be a sign of heavy bleeding. If you need to use 2 products together, so a pad and a tampon, 2 pads, a pad and a cup, that could also be a sign of heavy bleeding. If your bleed itself lasts for more than 7 days, that is also another sign of heavy bleeding. Or if you're bleeding through your clothes or onto bedding or anything like that, they are signs of heavy bleeding. They are common. It might be your normal if you're in any way concerned, or if you need some support to help you with that day-to-day living, do go and get yourself checked out. As I've already said, heavy bleeding, heavy periods can be normal. They can also be caused by lots of different reasons. So if you're at the very start of your period lifespan or your menstrual cycle lifespan, your periods might be a little bit heavier than before while they're settling down. If it's your first or second cycle back after pregnancy, as your body's resettling back down now, your periods might be heavier, and during perimenopause, as you're coming to the end of that menstrual lifespan, you might notice a change in your bleed and it might get a lot heavier for you. It can also be caused by menstrual health conditions, so PCOS, which stands for polycystic ovary syndrome, fibroids or endometriosis can also be a cause of heavy bleeding. If you don't have a diagnosis of any of those things and you're concerned about heavy bleeding, do go and get yourself checked out for those. There are tests and scans and all sorts of support for you. Other medications that you might be taking can cause heavy bleeding, and stress and depression are also triggers for heavy bleeding. So do look at your lifestyle. If it is a particularly stressful time, what can you do to remove that stress? If you are having mental health issues, do go and get support, because even talking therapy, it doesn't have to necessarily be a doctor or a GP supporting you. It can be a therapist that may well benefit your heavy bleeding. Next up, blood clots. They are a scary part of your menstrual cycle, especially if it's something you've not seen before or you don't see regularly. But to an extent, they are a normal part of the bleed and your cycle. Blood clots, they look like red jelly. They look really weird sometimes for some people. And again, like as I've said, they can be a bit scary to see. They're a mixture of blood cells, tissue from the lining of the uterus, and the proteins that are in your blood that have combined up together. They tend to appear on the heaviest days of your cycle. For the most part, they aren't a cause for concern, but if you are experiencing multiple blood clots larger than around the size of a 10p coin throughout your cycle, throughout your bleed, they could be a sign of heavy menstrual bleeding, or they could be a sign of fibroids. I'm in no way saying they are, but they could be. So this would be the time to get some support from your healthcare provider if you're concerned about those. That is a very, very speedy whistle-stop tour of bleeding, of menstrual bleeding. Hopefully that's answered a lot of your questions. If you do have any more questions, please do reach out. If you need some personalised support, please do see your GP or your healthcare provider, and they can answer those for you. Thank you for listening.